Welcome to You Want to Write for Games, a LibertyCon panel for LibertyCon 2021. We have quite a prestigious group here to give you all advice so that in 40 years you can be the elder statesman on the panel. Speak that term.
Thanks, Bill.
So I didn't even mention you, Steve. Anyhow, so welcome and very much. I'd like to have each of our panelists introduce themselves. Walter, why don't you begin talking about how you started in gaming and what you've done?
Sure. I'm Walter Hunt. I'm a science fiction, historical fiction writer. I have a number of novels, including a few from Baen. I started writing game materials way back in the 80s with Bill, and wrote for Steve, and wrote for a number of different game organizations. We wrote for FASA, and really got into being at the creative end of the spear. I was one of the original minions of Game Lords back when Game Lords existed back in the early 80s, and it's been big fun and a long ride.
Aren't you still doing some GURPS? Haven't
done anything like that in a while. Eric Flint keeps me pretty busy with 1632. Plus my own writing.
That's next panel. Okay.
Next panel. That's right.
Ferguson.
Hi, I'm C.S. Ferguson. I'm an author and a game designer. I got into game design really accidentally. My kids were sick of me staying home all day and not playing with them. I had to convince them I really was working. So I asked them what they wanted to do. They said they wanted to design a game together. At the time, I was doing artwork for an RPG. So I said, okay, fine, let's design a game together. What do you want it to be? And they said, zombies. So I designed a game with them, did some artwork, threw it up on Kickstarter, and made $30,000 on it.
Wow.
And then just rolled that one into the next design and the next one and the next one. And then people started calling me. Companies started calling me and saying, hey, can you design a game for us? It honestly was that accidental.
Brian.
I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm Brian Cooksey. I'm primarily a game editor. My first design job came about because I was looking for an editing gig. And I said, hey, you need an editor? And the person I asked said, no, but could you design me a system? So I was like, my first thought was, of course I can't design you a system. And then I realized I've been playing games since 1982. Maybe I can. And then as it happened, yes, I could.
It was accessible, wasn't it?
Actually, my first design gig was with Mike Balachik and the Sagaborn system.
The Sagaborn.
Yeah.
Very nice.
So that was how that came about. But so yeah, I've done a little bit of design, a moderate amount of editing, and a whole lot of playing.
Thank you. Doug?
Well, most of my game design experience has been decidedly non-commercial. And I just realized as we were setting up for this panel that pretty much every game I've ever designed has been a challenge design. Like looking at somebody else's game and saying, what a load of crap. I can do better than that.
It's a good motivator.
I've been designing games, scenarios for RPGs since about 77 or so. Been playing war games since probably 64. My parents bought me Bismarck from Avalon Hill when I was 12. And I forced my younger sisters to learn how to play the game so I could play it.
Well, that's mean.
They were not impressed. The biggest game I ever designed was an academic macroeconomics simulation, which was because a young friend of mine told me about the Internation simulation they were doing at his AP class in social studies. I said, oh, tell me how that goes. He said, oh, by the 5th or 6th turn, there's usually a nuclear war because people get bored. I said, what are they trying to teach you? So I said, if I can't write something better than that, I should just put my pencil down. So
Fritz?
And I am Colonel Kevin Fritz Fotovich. I am one of the directors of LibertyCon. And what I do for game design is to take existing games and try to put them into a large format. Brian's doing it. Into a large format for convention scenarios to where a lot of people can play. For example, I took Steve Jackson's game, Cthulhu Dice, and turned it into this big, huge thing so people can really interactive with it.
That is a huge thing.
But that's what I do. I augment games that already exist and try to transform them for bigger audiences or a larger play field, or literally larger play
Thank
field.
you. I'll introduce who I am in a minute, but I go back as long as Steve, which shows from our hair and mine, or what I don't have. But I will make an observation I made about 1978 when someone said something about Steve, and I said, you know, he takes the most obvious idea and makes it so much better it works. And that was my observation on what Steve has done with so many things. Now, which gets to Steve, which if anyone watching this needs an introduction on Steve at this point, you should probably go back to watching the Cartoon Channel.
Well, that's going to chase away the audience.
Steve.
I'm Steve Jackson. I got serious about games in college by playing an awful lot of Risk and SPI games. I went to work with metagaming after I graduated from college. It was just a part-time gig that I fell into by accident, but I found out that I really liked making games. That was where I did Ogre. And in 1980, I started my own company and haven't stopped yet.
Just to round out the group and explain all the gray hair, my name's Bill Fawcett. I was excited when the Avalon Hill games went to hexes from squares when I was playing them in high school with my buddies, and I've been in gaming ever since. I went from being interested in games to game designing for the corporate world, and had the exciting adventures of doing things like designing games to teach insurance salesmen how to sell. In order to overcome this exciting world and adventure, I started writing a lot of D&D stuff because I live near Lake Geneva, and started writing articles, which ended up many in the Dragon, and then worked for the first 45 Dragons. At that point, a bunch of my buddies and I said, can you stand insurance anymore? And I said, no. And he said, well, I can't stand law anymore. So let's take my brothers and found Mayfair Games. And that's what I did. And for the last 40 years, I've been doing games, science fiction, and all my hobbies. So I guess I'll retire when my hobbies stop being interesting. So I'm pretty safe at this point. I ran the Rolaids line, and I was the chief designer. So I did most of the board games. And Doug, yeah, Empire Builder was there because we hated the end of Rail Baron. So yeah, on our way back from a con in Michigan, we designed it in the car. So, gentlemen, a lot of perspective, a lot of success, a lot of knowledge. We all got started some time ago. Let's go around, and I'd like your opinions on, is this a good time for someone to want to get into game design, to want to write games, to want to design games, to want to write RPGs? Or is it like the early 90s when the big companies were playing? Is it a bad time? Is it hard to get in? Is it a good time to get in? What do you think? What's your experience, and what would you advise? What would you say was good and bad about now? CS, why don't you start?
Yeah, so I think it's a fantastic time to start. We're kind of in a divergent market right now. So my experience is with the crowdfunding, and that makes it almost ridiculously easy to start, to kind of dip your toes in and get something out there. But what it also does, unfortunately, is it's really flooded the market with a lot of stuff, and not all of it is particularly good. So there are a lot of people, especially people who are really into Kickstarters, who have had bad experiences. And I mean, it's going to be easy to get something out, but it's going to be, I think, harder than usual to get noticed. You have a bit more uphill to get noticed and for people to actually think that you've got something good.
Walter, how does this compare to the science fiction book market?
Well, the book market is kind of weird now. But I like the observation about Kickstarter and about the internet in general. It seems to me that there was a period, and Bill alluded to it, where basically role-playing games and game writing went corporate. That there was a smaller number of companies doing a larger number of projects that had a higher entry. We were able to do a lot of contract work back in the late 80s and early 90s because of that. But Kickstarter and the internet has opened it up so that you can produce a lot more. But I think you meet a higher standard now. When we started, when I first met Bill, I met Bill at Origins in 1982. That's the year that Empire Builder came out. And God, that was a long time ago now, wasn't it? We met in '82, and if you walked around if you walked around the convention floor, there were all these little companies producing all these little games, none of which would make it on Kickstarter now because the graphics aren't good, or because it's derivative, or because it wasn't interesting, or it wasn't well written. And some of those guys wound up in science fiction writing. I mean, Ray Feist, right? And me. To choose an example at random. So I think that in some ways it's easier, but in some ways the standard has changed, and that's an important consideration.
Good point,
Ryan.
I agree that it's a good time for the reasons that have been brought up already, and I'll add to that. So we're all old enough to remember when desktop publishing actually hit, and what a game changer that was. And we've gotten into a similar change just the past few years with being able to get your stuff out there and get people to see it. Because Kickstarter is a really good example. The crowdfunding thing is really good, but also places like DriveThruRPG and itch.io are excellent for that, because so I will answer your question again. Yes, this is a great time to get started in game design. As long as your expectations are not that you will do this as your primary job necessarily, because I don't. But and I'm not saying it's impossible, but you can get a lot of good stuff out there and get almost immediate feedback, and you don't even have to crowdfund it. You can, like, if you've got a rather small game, you can put it out there on itch and get a lot of people's eyes on it, and that plus a Twitter account goes a long way.
What effect do podcasts have on the market, Brian? On people producing stuff? By the way, don't you do one?
I do. I'm on one called. I used to be on one called Play on Target, and now I do one called Armor Goes Clank with Mark Kinney, formerly of All Games Considered, and he was one of the OG gaming podcasters from back in the day. He started like mere minutes after the podcast concept got started. So, but yeah. In my opinion, podcasts are not as powerful as they used to be as far as as far as promoting things. They still do have an effect, but podcasts used to be, because I've been listening to them and doing them for a while. Podcasts used to be sort of the only game in town as far as that sort of content goes, but then things like Twitch and YouTube took over a whole lot of that aspect of it. So now podcasts are a little more secondary than they used to be. So they are important, but I mean, I know YouTubers with 20 times my reach, Media in general is very good for that, but there's so much more of it these days that, in my opinion, it's a lot harder to find what you're looking for as far as a podcast on a specific subject or even a YouTube channel.
I'm going to cut short the question a little because we're all in consensus. Yeah. Except to ask Steve this question.
I've got a little bit different opinion on this.
What's that, Doug?
What Brian was saying about games is correct, but it occurs to me that those game designs are analogous to indie publishing, where you're publishing yourself and you're doing all your own promotion. And the hard thing to do is to get your game in front of somebody's eyes. If you're looking at getting into game shops, now you're competing with Euro games, and the presentation has to be top-notch. And that's a really difficult hurdle to climb.
Yeah, in fact, at Mayfair, we were the big force that brought most of the Euro games in originally. And while it made us a lot of money, it made it really hard for us to do product because it raised our price to sit next to them on the shelf excessively. And of course, as Steve will remember, and I can remember, we didn't used to be able to type it in and put it up. It was print it out, heat the wax, lay it out, and cut it with it was
uphill in the snow both ways.
I've got some early Steve Jackson games that I'm waiting for him to sign.
Fritz, if you haven't done a lot of designs, is the current market encouraging you to maybe do your own game design? Okay. Probably not show it to Steve first, but do your own game design.
Now, what I do is encourage people to do game design a whole lot. I belong to a Facebook group called Tabletop Innovators, and the guy that started that group, that I helped him launch that group, was all about just making interactive books that, as you open them up, you can play your games, and you can flip through the books. What do I need? Do I need it? I'm on a water adventure. I'm in a dungeon adventure. I'm on a cave adventure, and there are 67 adventures. And he printed the books both with grids and without grids. But as far as I'm concerned, to go and answer your first initial question, is this a good time for game design? As far as I'm concerned, it's always a good time for game design.
Okay, that's
always.
Well, we found it that way, but getting in can be harder at times. Steve,
no, it's hard to get in. Yes,
Steve, you see from both sides, because you see a lot of freelancers and new people coming to you as well with game ideas. Some even want to do odd computer games or apps or something. What have you seen any changes over the last 20 years and what's happening as far as what you have to do and how they approach you and things like that? Because you have a perspective unique.
Yes, in a word, there continue to be transformative changes. Everybody is used to desktop publishing now, and I'm not going to say everybody is used to Kickstarter now because things are still being discovered about how to make it work well, but everybody's got the idea. The other really transformative changes have been in the availability of Asian printing in small quantities, which makes it possible to be really start to finish an indie publisher in your own house. And then the feedback of all these things together that creates what Phil Reed calls the dumpster effect, which is what CS was referring to. It's every couple of weeks a new batch of games comes out and goes right into the dumpster, and you've got 2 weeks to look at that dumpster and pick the best ones before the next batch is dumped down on top of them and they're buried.
Right. I will emphasize that I founded Games Plus in Chicago, the largest hobby shop in the Midwest at the moment, at least. And I keep in contact with the two guys who were much better businessmen than me that made it a massive success. But we talk about, and their biggest problem is picking product. Now, if you've got a Steve Jackson product, it's in. If you've got certain companies, yes, of course, at D&D or any of the major role places. But they get offered literally hundreds a month of things they have no idea what it's like and who they're from. And generally the decision is we can't take a chance on it because most of these companies couldn't handle the returns if we did. And you have to wait for it to build its own success before you can start buying into that company's products.
And let me tell you, having a marquee name does not automatically mean you get very much shelf space for anything. I can just about be guaranteed that they will read my solicitations.
Yes.
Which is more than a lot of people get. After that,
does this speak to the answer to your question, Bill? That basically it's very hard to break in and be a breakthrough success. Like, GURPS was a breakthrough success in a market where there was only D&D really and Traveler, and all of a sudden GURPS was a thing. I imagine it's hard to have a thing like Dominion became a thing. But it's one of many, many, many games that came out in that era, and most of them did not redefine the market. Is there a chance for another Traveler or another GURPS, another game like that? I don't know what Shadowrun, I guess, is another example of a post ED&D game. I don't know if that affects the question that you really asked.
Shadowrun was brilliant, not specifically in the game mechanics, though those are fine, but in the extremely nervy mashup of cyberpunk and fantasy, and very high quality writing that made it all work.
But it is very. Steve. I'm sorry, Steve. I have to give you a compliment. Very few companies have managed to stay on top and keep innovative and keep their products in front of the public. Period. He says, having no more Mayfair games, guys. We died 5 years ago now and 2 owners ago. And the fact is that Steve's reinvented himself 3 or 4 times.
You have to.
Well, could you speak for a second on doing the way GURPS has evolved? I know that's the next panel, but you went from what to what to what, because you've kept GURPS relevant by making changes in it.
Yes, and the last change may be beginning to get a little bit old. We'll have to see. But you do new additions as the market changes, as you learn more about what the market now wants.
Okay. So
I could go on for a long time, but I won't, because there are a lot of us here and we've got a lot to talk about. This is probably a time to throw in a plug. If you are thinking about coming to DragonCon, Bill and I are going to do a long workshop on game design. Plug, plug, plug.
In fact, we have a number of other people like Doug Hyde coming in, and we will be reviewing all of the participants' limited numbers games for them, and commenting and offering improvements. And we have quite a group coming in, from author Steve Sterling, SM Sterling, to Doug and Gene, gal who's doing a lot of work.
Look at this as a spin-off of the very successful DragonCon Writers Workshop.
Yeah.
So it's a very interactive with speakers and us, and then we're going to review product for every participant, which
that is a golden opportunity.
Yeah, very unusual.
One other thing I want to throw in before we pick another subject. Yes, as Fritz says, it's always a good time to make games. This may, despite the problems, be the best time yet to make games.
I agree.
I'm jealous I'm not 40 years younger. And so, for a lot of reasons, including redheads, but particularly games.
They're the best time to make a brand new game system for role playing. But when you're not role playing, you want a tabletop game, give me something new. I mean, me personally, I love Mars Attacks. I love Mars Attacks, but give me a dice game that's awesome. I'm playing it.
Now, this leads to a question. If someone came up to you at a convention or here at LibertyCon when we're live next year, please, Brandy, or whenever. And it's a big decision this year, but I miss it. I really do. I moved south, and they didn't have it. Very frustrating. I moved to Atlanta, and they canceled DragonCon.
Can't win.
That close.
So it's you, Bill.
I had no idea you were that close.
And I watched the car rain.
No known connection. Yeah.
Can you move to Washington real quick?
Anyhow, the thing, if someone came up to each of you and said, hey, I want to get into being a game designer, what's the first thing I should do? What's the first step, or what steps should I take? Could each of you give me a step they should take so we can all sort of make suggestions on what you would tell a new game designer to do or think about or what?
Start dating wealthy people.
Fritz, you're saying?
No, I was going to number 3. Somebody else, 2 other people talk first.
Okay, I'll go first. My honest advice would be start attending conventions, start meeting people. You don't exist in a bubble. There are thousands of people who go to these conventions. Sometimes, like I attend, 12, 13, 14, 15 conventions a year. There are people who are regulars at the conventions. They know the systems, they know the markets, they know what's coming, they know what's going, and you're going to learn far more about the business and the market of game design, not necessarily, the mechanics of game design itself, but you'll learn a lot more about the business of it by going to conventions and meeting people and talking to people than you will sitting in front of your computer, Googling and looking up questions on Quora or something like that.
Yeah.
Let alone at college. They don't teach the business of business. I'm right there with C.S. Ferguson. They teach you business, but they don't teach you the business of business.
Yeah.
Okay, Brian?
I'll just jump on CS's coattails here because, the networking thing is vital. But even when you're not at a con, chances are you've got some friends you're playing games with. These days, obviously, you're probably playing them on Zoom. But anyway, use those friends as playtesters. First off, if you have a design that you're trying to perfect, send it to the people who already know how to play games, and those are chances are like your buddies down the road. So do that. You can also every now and then. I know more than one game company that was created by 3 or 4 people that just happened to have a good idea and had been in a game place for a long time. So I'm not saying necessarily start a company that way, but I am saying that people who play games are your best resources for whether or not your game is working.
Now, the best way to play games is to not invest more than your wife will let you.
Fortunately, my wife does art for the RPG industry, so I'm golden. We're
Yes, Steve.
Ooh, okay. Absolutely network.
Excellent word. I was about to use that.
Yeah, that's part of it, but you can accomplish a whole lot of networking without leaving the house anymore. Just between virtual conventions and the various, BGG, RPGNet, and so on and so on, you can meet a lot of people. You can find out what people are talking about, and that will give you some hints on what you should play to understand what the people at the cutting edge are doing. Fritz, are you putting up a hand?
Yeah, I got something to add on just what Steve just mentioned. I'm going to scoot up a little bit, make sure everybody can hear me. I am now 53 years old. When I was 20, 21 or something, I had a lot of ideas. People were like, "This is great. This is awesome. This is amazing. You should do this." And I networked all those things, and I did nothing with them. Now I'm 50. Well, I turned 54 this year, but I've been doing a lot over the last decade and a half. But I assumed in my 20s that stuff happened all the time. It doesn't happen all the time, you 20-year-olds. Take them by the horns. Take the networking that happens. Like most recently, I just pitched an idea to Steve Jackson that was from a friend of mine and said, "Hey, check this out." He said, "This is awesome." And he sent it to his team. I forwarded that email. I was like, "Look what Steve Jackson said about your idea. She just turned 22. She should be absolutely thrilled that this is about to be something."
Absolutely. All right. If you were going to, what would you, and we'll get Doug and Walter first here. What would you tell them if someone was looking to say, "I wanted to get into game design"? Where would they look, or what would you suggest about what they think about what they're going to do, what kind of product, what the product's going to be about? What is the kind of product that someone starting today should look at? And I'll start with the consideration that whatever's hot now won't be hot by the time your game's out. So keep that in mind.
Question, very good question.
Walter, what would you suggest about?
It's just like writing. Don't try to write the next Harry Potter novel, because, or whatever it is, because as you said, by the time you get it done, it may no longer be the trendy thing. So it's not so much the trendy thing; it's the thing that is different from 100 other things. I don't think you could do the next Settlers of Catan as this time we'll use buffaloes instead of sheep. I mean, you can't do. The thing is,
Denver. That's
this echoes
right
back to this echoes back to what Steve was saying earlier. There's such a welter of games and things and Kickstarter projects and in Indiegogo things. You can't do the same thing again. So you better have something unusual, if not unique. You have to make sure that it meets a certain standard if you really want to produce it. What you produce for your guys is not the same as what you have to produce for Steve Jackson Games or for Queen Games, because we can't say Mayfair Games, Queen Games. So it has to be it has to have a certain amount of quality to it, and not so much that you have the best graphic design, because the company will take care of that, or the best layout, because the company will take care of it. But it better be well written, and it better be interesting, and it better be different. Otherwise, it'll just get lost in the shuffle. You can't count on reliable response.
Okay, there are a few things that occur to me. The first thing.
Hard to hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I was saying there are a few things that occur to me. One of the important things, I think, if you're going to design a game, is pick something that speaks to you. Don't try to design to the market. If you're designing a Wild West game and you really don't care about Westerns, stop.
Yeah, that's good.
You've got to like what you're doing.
Yeah,
Just absolutely. They give book writers.
Another thing, as Walter said, don't worry too much about the graphics. That can be fixed in post. But I'm going to disagree with Brian a little bit about play testers. You don't want to play test with your friends, because they're going to ignore the problems that you have and just sort of fix them as they go. You want to play test with people that you don't know. And especially you can play test with people who you would never like to play the game with, because you want to play test with rules lawyers.
All I meant on that is that as long as you're play testing with people that will take notes.
Yeah.
Notes. is like whether it's your friends or somebody who are not friends. It doesn't
You
matter.
need the feedback, absolutely,
Yeah.
whether it's notes or you're standing in the background and they don't know who you are, which I had to do for some Mayfair games, or you just get your wife to run the game at DrenCon and watch from the next table, which I've also done a few times because she's a better gamer than I am. So you've got that. What advice would you give, CS?
I was just going to add to that. One of my tricks for playtesting is I actually have a network of people who are foreign, and I print out copies of the game and I send them to people in foreign countries, with the idea being that if I can write the rule set in English, send it to a playtester in Sweden for whom English is a second language, and they understand the rules and can play the game, then I figure I've got it down.
That's good.
And if they come back to me and say, this doesn't make any sense at all, well, then I have to modify how I'm, not necessarily the rules, but how I'm wording the rules. And so I have people in Europe and in Asia that I send those rules to for the playtesting.
At the risk of setting you up for 100 applications of products, Steve, what are you looking for in new submissions for unique games, not just something that's a step on what you've already got going? What would you look at? What would be the things you value in those?
I have no idea what I'm looking for in a unique game. It's going to be unique. I'm going to look at it and say, what is this? And then when I try it, it's going to be fun.
That,
I mean, you
I
didn't
think
know
said
what
it all right there.
off,
It really
did you?
does.
But
Okay.
It's like the Supreme Court in obscenity. I can't define it, but I'll know it when I see it.
When I see it,
So true. So
Steve
true.
Jackson, Potter Stewart, separated at birth. Okay.
Yeah. And I think another thing that when I did this, I would say, keep in mind who you think will play your game.
Oh, that's
Try and design a game for Hasbro for everyone. Pick a market for your game. Pick the type of player you think will want to play your game, and actually make it for that player, and make it work. Now, there's a lot of techniques for making it work. One of the things I learned very early in design was to reinforce player actions with results, preferably good, but some sort of result, so that the players are doing something all the time, like in Munchkin. You're always reacting. You're always playing. So I always tell them, look for something that the players will enjoy, even not on their exact turn.
Let me jump in on that. Because, yes, that's absolutely right. The flip side of it is do not reward player actions that you don't like.
Yep.
Don't reward failure.
Yeah, don't reward not being fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, and another thing to throw in, really remember what the levels are of game design. You have strategy, chess. You have absolute chance, dice. Where is your in between? It's like, where's the strategy? So, like, for example, Star Realms. Star Realms is a mixture of strategy and chance. Really think about what it is your game design is doing and how it's working between strategy and chance. You're
Do
not
you want to reward tactics or reward good luck?
well. There you go.
Yeah.
Fritz? Yeah, and there's always got to be a balance or a choice. All right, gentlemen, if
If
we
you
have
don't reward good luck at all, people won't want to take chances. And so,
Well,
yeah.
you will lose at chess.
yes, but they're not supposed to be taking chances.
I'm reminded of one saying I heard when somebody said among advanced squad leader players, let's get together and read the rule books for 3 hours.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I remember that distinctly. Also, Drognak Austin, which I actually played once.
Oh, yeah.
One of the few who actually played that game. And, well, yeah, it took all summer.
But you finished.
It had 4,000 pieces at the regimental level, all of the European theater.
Oh, yeah.
Avalon Hill did a great thing
I
about it.
remember playing the Battle of Stalingrad in Advanced Squad Leader.
Yeah, if you ever get the old Avalon Hill article from the magazine on it, read the game design. Question, gentlemen. If you were going to tell someone who wanted to get into it something to avoid in one sentence or a sentence or two, what would you tell that person to keep in mind or to be careful of or to be aware of or to not tell their wife about when they get into game design? What is a one sentence, here's the warning you should take with you? Walter?
Every company that accepts submissions has rules on how those submissions should be offered. Follow their rules. That's as true for publishing novels and short stories as anything else. I bet Steve Jackson Games has submission guidelines. Follow them. It's not that hard. The chances of you having something that's so good that the submission guidelines aren't important to you is very, very minimal. Follow whatever the company wants, or they'll just bin your submission.
Long sentence, but a good point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fritz?
It doesn't matter how good your idea is. If nobody's buying it, come up with another idea.
Brian?
Never pay someone else to publish your game.
Good point. Doug?
Don't quit your day job.
That's a good one.
Sounds like my writer's seminar.
That's a good one.
Yep.
That's a good one.
CS?
Do not design a game. If you're going to do it, be a games, plural, designer, because you don't get to choose which one is going to be a hit.
You're here.
Good one.
Good one there. Steve?
I'm going to do a follow-up to Walter's comment because, yes, we do have guidelines, and usually if something doesn't seem to have read the guidelines at all, yes, book delete. Maybe if it looks like they put a lot of work into it, there'll be a response saying, please read the guidelines. But my one sentence is the old bit of writer's advice: murder your babies. Because once the things you really like, be willing to get rid of them. Once in the past year, I had a submission that really, really flouted the guidelines, but it showed clever ideas and talent. And that guy got a long response. And what he told me boiled down to, but this is my style. I like writing this way. So I sent him a very short, polite response, and I won't be publishing him.
Bye.
Yeah.
Which leads to my one line of advice. Everyone who doesn't like your game doesn't hate you.
That's a good one.
Which too many game designers in my life have not figured out in their first several designs, and they rarely last that long to have many. Because it's like they don't like your book, they don't like your game. Doesn't mean they don't like you. It means they didn't like the way the game played. Create a new one; they'll love it. It's different.
Look at how we're getting along all these years, Bill.
Walter, I've never told you what I thought of yours, but anyhow.
Moving right along.
Seriously.
But seriously.
Examples of tragic flaws in games that should have worked that have come out over the last years. What are some games you thought you'd like and didn't, and why? It's a tough question, so I'll give you a second to think on it. In fact,
wow.
I'll give
I can give a quick response while everybody else is thinking because I have.
One more time, Bill. What are the games that came out over the last year that we did not like?
Over the last years, decades.
Okay, so
why? What was a good idea that was tragically flawed?
Okay, I think I'd rather not name the game because friends worked on it. my peers worked on it back in the
Not to
day.
do at our point in life, but yeah.
But Lauren Weisman and I sat down, this was about 10 years ago now, to review an old GDW game that we both had fond memories of and thought, maybe this is worth reviving. And we peeled the shrink wrap off some new old stock and got into it just like we were getting into a brand new game. And an hour and a half later, we looked at each other and agreed we didn't want to play this. The state of the art has advanced so much that that game, it had a good idea in there, but it would have been easier to sit down and create something brand new than it would have been to translate that game to the 2010s. And
I'll contribute my effect. It was one of my early lessons in game design, and that was, I'm a train nut, obviously. Empire Builder, all that. I love train games, but the end of Rail Baron, where you chase and tag each other and you can lose the game after winning big and making all the right decisions, was so counter to the rest of the game and so anomalous and so random factor luck at the end of the game that as much as Gary Gygax loved it, I hated it from the beginning. And it taught me that one tragic flaw can turn you off on a game and not to put things in a game that didn't fit with the game. And that was an example of when I lived, the game that I otherwise was thrilled with. We just stopped having the ending eventually. Talisman, Walter?
Sure. Because of the exact thing that is.
Yeah.
That you can play all the way to the end, and then if you screw up the ending, it doesn't matter how far ahead you are. Especially when they introduce the alternate endings, one of which is you die.
Yeah.
So what happened is people did what Steve talks about. They made new ones that were not Talisman. Even Dungeon Quest, or as we like to call it, Everybody Dies, is a better game than Talisman. Descent and all the dungeon crawlers that follow it are much, much better games. And we don't need to go back to Talisman as much as we like it. It's a very rare game that is behind the design curve you can still go back to and like. Like we like Avalon Hill Civilization, Advanced Civilization. Still a great game. But it's not as good as some of the others. We just like it for old time's sake. But it only comes out like once a year now. But Talisman, it's broken in the end. And I won't play it anymore. That's my example.
Doug, you have a thought?
Yeah. You'll probably remember this from some of you. Scrimmage.
Oh, yeah.
That's going back.
Professional football. One of the worst game designs I've ever seen.
Why?
It took literally 45 minutes to play a 10-second down.
That's rough. Yeah.
I mean, it looked like it should really be pretty good because you controlled every man and you had all the stats and everything like that. It was just adapting completely wrong mechanics to the concept.
Yeah, football by SPI.
Yeah, it was terrible.
CS.
Yeah, you kind of have me stumped here a little bit. I was trying to think. I'll go generic on you and say that there are a lot of games that on the surface look like they're going to be a lot of fun. They have a great presentation. The production value is very high. Mechanically, they don't work for me because a turn sequence for me falls in a proper turn sequence for me falls into two categories. Either the turn sequence is a rapid turn sequence so that people are going through their turns and it comes back to your turn quickly, or on somebody else's turn, I have to pay attention because I may counter something they do, or I may act, or something like that. If the turn sequence is a slow and methodical turn sequence, and you have 5 people playing the game, and it takes an hour after I play my turn for it to come back to me, and I don't even have to be there for that hour, then I really quickly lose interest. I once played a game where I quite literally took my turn, got up, drove down to Taco Bell, ordered my food, waited, got my food, went back to the game store. It was a game night at a game store, sat down, and it was not yet my turn again.
Well, that's a game
Yes.
that played asynchronously on the internet.
Yeah.
All right, we have 4 minutes left, gentlemen.
Okay, I have a quick example.
Brian, one final.
This one comes from a computer role-playing game called Shadowrun Hong Kong, obviously based on the tabletop game. And actually, 95% of that game is great, but the hacking subsystem requires the player to be good at solving puzzles rather than the character that I just put a bunch of points into hacking for. And don't do that. If my character is good at a thing, I shouldn't have to also be good at that thing or something else. So, make sure that
reverse is true. What does my 98 intelligence tell me?
Yeah, exactly, 100%.
In the last 3 minutes we have before our hour is exactly up, in a short phrase or two, what type of game would you recommend someone who had never designed a game before try first, get started on designing? What would you recommend if you were teaching a class? What would their first assignment be? He said running a workshop. Brian?
Mine is also really quick, and several other people have mentioned this as well. Pick a thing that you are passionate about and that you think is really, really fun. Start with that, please.
Not topic, but type.
Yeah.
Steve?
Oh, got it. Okay.
Well, that's still what I'd say. Pick a type of game that you really, really like, and try to do a good one like that.
Yeah.
Fred?
What do you like playing? You're going to be good
right
at
there
that.
with Steve and Brian. Stick with what you think is fun, and also make sure you can play on the tabletop and online.
Okay.
I'll riff off what CS said here. When you do a design, make sure that everybody gets to play at the same time.
And CS, you get the word, and then we'll wrap.
Yep. I would say whatever you think is a cool idea, try to layer that idea on top of checkers.
Huh.
Okay.
Interesting thought.
Actually, that's a very good suggestion.
Actually, I'm looking at cards and trying to layer on some rummy now. I would say one other thing that I would say is look at a game that you can produce either the pieces or publish it without a massive initial expense. It will be more appealing to a company to do it, and it'll allow you to do future ones if it doesn't succeed.
That's why I do tabletop
That
RPGs.
was a hell of a long sentence, Bill. That was a very long sentence.
Very long phrase, yes. But then I usually see my books, 140, 150, 150.
I've read your
like
book, Bill. I know.
Hey, I'd like to thank all of you for excellent contributions and some good insights into all this, and appreciate your being here. And we'll see you next year all live face to face, and we can do this to an audience and really drive them crazy.
Looking forward to giving you a hug.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you, and thank you, Brandy, for having us.